Nothing breaks my heart quite so much as a writing coach as talking with someone who has not reached their dream of being a writer. Now, hold up. I talk to a lot of people who come to me because they haven't reached that dream goal of being a successful writer yet. And that's very exciting because they're at the beginning of their journey. But the sad thing is when I'm talking to someone who could have, would have, should have reached that dream and be enjoying their writer life, which is their best life, but instead they're still in the trenches, or even worse, they're not even in those trenches yet. They're on the outside looking in. And they're feeling bad about other people who actually managed to succeed. And they're getting more and more bitter. And the worst part is they did it to themselves. That's right. That's the saddest thing. It's the writers that self-sabotage. And there's nothing that self-sabotages quite so much as a lie. Many writers lie to themselves. And even worse, they're believing the lie that they're telling themselves. And that's kind of one of the main qualities of a lie. It's that it's really believable in many ways, but there's a ripple effect to lies. Lies can be really devastating. They can start small and then they just grow exponentially into something that can really affect more than you ever believed. I always like to tie in essential parts of your book or writing theory or storytelling theory to things that are part of a successful writing career, like a writer life aspect. And here's the good news. Every good story arc begins with a character who believes in a lie, either one they were told or one of their own making or both. So that's why in this episode of the How to Be an Author podcast, I wanted to talk a little bit about the lies that your character believes in your book. But more importantly, I wanted to talk about the lies that writers tell themselves and that they believe, because these lies can hurt your writing career so much that you can have absolute failure to launch as a writer, or it can really hamper your ability to reach your full potential. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about these lies so that you see that they're not so unique. They're not even true. We're going to learn to see the truth and move past the lies so that we can enter a whole new era of positivity in our writing career. If you're a writer dreaming of becoming a successful author, join me, writing coach Karena Akhavein, on the How to Be an Author podcast, your weekly source for writing information, inspiration, and motivation. Welcome to the How to Be an Author podcast. I'm writing coach Karena Akhavein, and so many of my wonderful writers come to me because they are caught up in a lie, or they're stuck with their book, with their writing career. And many times there is a lie at the core of that as well, and you can't even see it. The most insidious thing about lies is the fact that they are uniquely able to undermine our perception of reality and distort it. And lies can infiltrate everything, our thoughts, our beliefs, our actions. That's huge. They cause significant harm and damage, not only to ourselves, but to others. Imagine how lies have this unique power to erode trust, to create divisions between people, and basically hinder personal and professional growth. And one of those professional growth things is your life as a writer. Now, one of the most challenging aspects of lies, some lies are massive, of course, but many lies are subtle. They masquerade as truths, and sometimes they masquerade as helpful advice or as beliefs that should, kind of rule your actions, as values. Sometimes our values are messed up. You've seen these, antagonist characters that are super well written where they have a really strong value system and they think that they're an honorable person, but that's because they believe in a lie. So when a lie masquerades as a truth, it's pretty difficult to detect. And also a lie can be a little bit seductive. Lies do hurt, but sometimes they offer temporary relief. They can trap you into thinking that it's more comfortable to believe the lie. And the problem is that it traps you then in this web, and it prevents you from embracing the truth that could be ugly and messy, but that is the only way that you can start to live authentically. Lies can really cause massive emotional and psychological pain. They lead to self-doubt, insecurity, distorted image of self. When we believe lies, we make decisions based on false information. And that means that your outcome can't possibly be correct. It means that you're going to be missing opportunities. You're going to be going down the wrong road. And you're probably going to be also, just damaging your self-image along the way. And lies have this horrible ripple effect. There's not just one lie. When there's one lie, then more lies come after it. They always say, what a tangled web we weave. And that's such a great image, because this series of lies, or this web of lies, is so difficult to unravel. And look what happens to a fly stuck in a spider's web. It dies a long, agonizing death. And we don't want that to happen to you. That's terrible. And the other problem with lies is that they spread. They spread outwards, and you cannot control their spread. It is like a wildfire where it starts off and you think, oh, I'm just going to roast a few marshmallows. And the next thing you know, you have destroyed a whole community. That's horrific. And that's what a lie does as well, because a lie can start being just one thing that is impacting maybe one person, but then it can expand and it can have this horrific domino effect. And if you're at the source of the lie and you're watching this happen, I can only imagine that that's the most horrific feeling you can possibly have. Imagine a character in your book where that would happen to them, but that could just as well happen to you. So recognizing and confronting lies is crucial for personal well-being, for your professional life, and just for everything, for even your community. It's really important. And recognizing and confronting lies takes introspection. It takes critical thinking, and it takes a commitment to seeking the truth. And that's not always easy, of course. But we have to try to do this, to dismantle the power of lies and to cultivate this culture of authenticity, trust, and growth. And in our writing careers, it is so very important to confront the lies we tell ourselves. Acknowledging this really helps us to find our unique voice. It helps us to create work that's actually going to resonate with others. It helps us to actually create work, because believe me, so many of my writers, by the time they come to me, they are absolutely stuck because of the lies that they have believed. But first, let's talk briefly about this whole idea of the lies that your character believes. Because too many of my writers, especially some of my younger writers, some of my adventure or fantasy writers, they always think, when I think, okay, what's the lie your character believes? I would say 50% of the time, the writers are like, oh, her parents didn't tell her she was a princess or something similar to that. And I'm like, okay, but let's dig deeper. Let's think about the lies that are more fundamental in crafting a story arc for a novel. The lie that a character believes is usually a central element, and it's going to drive their internal conflict and personal growth throughout the narrative. And this lie is something that acts as a barrier between your character and their relationships, a barrier between your character and their true self, a barrier between your character and reaching their goals. All of these things are really, really crucial in a story arc, right? And that lie really stands in the way. The lie is something that needs to be big enough to shape their beliefs, decisions, actions, and it always needs to lead to significant consequences, which in part, I would even say mostly, is going to be responsible for that character development, because they have to develop past this. Now, the specific lie that your character believes definitely depends on the context of your story or the theme or the genre of your story, right? So yeah, my character didn't know she was a princess. That's fine. That's a lie. Okay, but let's look deeper and see what kind of category of lie this might belong to. So one of the lies that your character believes, one of the categories, is a lie of inadequacy. This is when your character believes that for some reason they are unworthy or lacking, right? So you can see how this lie, okay, this is a big category of lie, but this lack of self-worth or this feeling of lack can lie in many things, such as past experiences or internal or external insecurities. Your character has some kind of an issue. Maybe it's mental or psychological, or maybe something that they did in the past. But any of those things is going to hinder their ability to pursue their goal or their dreams, and it's going to prevent them from making meaningful, honest connections with other characters. And so in terms of their story arc, this means that, they need to learn to recognize their true value and embrace what makes them different in all of its messiness, their strengths and weaknesses. So that's the first category, lie of inadequacy. Now, another type of lie is the lie of control. This one's really, really interesting because many of you, especially the younger writers, again, the ones writing fantasy, but many books are like this because our characters have this main character energy, right? This is the character who is acting decisively to try to control the plot of the book. And this can kind of have a lie at the center of it, right? Your character believes that they must have absolute control over every aspect of their life and maybe other people's lives, right? To ensure happiness, security, safety, right? That's really interesting because this lie seems like it's coming from a good place, right? That they think that they're responsible and that they need to be the hero. But this means that your character is going to be manipulating. They might be micromanaging. They might be letting their ego be their guide. And this is going to cause strain in their relationships, and it's going to really hurt their personal growth, right? So it's important for a character who believes this lie in the course of their story arc, in the course of their character arc, they're going to come to understand that there is some kind of beauty and nobility in surrendering, in being adaptable, in letting others take the reins for a second, and even in embracing the unknown. And the unknown is a very scary thing, right? This kind of giving up control can be absolutely terrifying, but many times it's necessary. Another lie that many of our characters believe, and this is a really interesting one, because there are many story arcs that are revenge story arcs, but oftentimes revenge is a lie because the character believes that getting revenge is going to bring them closure. It's going to make them satisfied with the outcome. It's going to make them happy. And oftentimes that is really not the case, right? When a character is seeking revenge, oftentimes this is a destructive path. This comes from a place of anger. It comes from a place of aggression, resentment. And really in this sort of a character arc, your character needs to start to realize that maybe justice isn't what they thought it was. Maybe forgiveness is really a really important thing. Maybe personal healing is more crucial than getting revenge on those who wronged us, because, half the time when we believe that somebody wronged us, that also stems from a lie. Many times we had a part in that as well. I just finished writing a book under my pen name where my character feels really wronged by somebody that she thought was her friend. And this is a storyline that never really experiences closure in the book because it's not a primary storyline, but it's really important for my character to see that, maybe she had a part in this too. Maybe she wasn't the innocent baby angel that she's making herself out to be. And maybe some friendships can't be fixed, and that's kind of okay. It's not a happy thing, but the character growing to a point where they stop believing the lie that people owe them their friendship if they're a good person, that's not real life. So it's actually a satisfying story arc that she never speaks to this person again. You see what I mean? The final lie I'm going to talk about for our characters, or the final category of lies, is the lie of independence. This is a really interesting one because Oftentimes, as a writing coach, I recommend that my writers find a way to isolate their main character at the beginning of the story. And too many writers, especially younger writers, love to write characters with a massive friend group because they want their character to be popular. They want their character to have fun. They don't want their character to be alone. And so I think that somewhere the ideal lies somewhere in the middle. But the important thing is when your character is isolated, they're forced to work on themselves. However, the problem lie is that your character believes that they must face their challenges alone. They're avoiding vulnerability doing this, and they're relying solely on their own strength. And this isolates them from meaningful connections, and they don't get help where they need it. Now, this is really interesting because actually this stuff happening helps your story arc. So this is something that your character might want to fix over time, but it really is very, very useful for you to have them believing this lie at the beginning. So you see here where a character journey involves believing in a lie. Important. You can't create a perfect character who doesn't believe in a lie and hope to have a good story arc, because the journey is confronting and unraveling lies. It is personal growth. It is transformation. It is a shift in worldview, right? Your character's beliefs are going to be challenged. They're going to be shattered. They might be rebuilt, and they're going to be going closer to a truer understanding of themselves. But of course, don't also believe the lie that every ending has to be a happy one and that every character's arc needs to be a positive one. Some of our characters never really learn their lesson. They try to change and they change in the wrong way and they keep hurting others. And then they end the story maybe with a hopeful piece, but they haven't quite resolved their arc. And that can be okay if it's well done. But now that we've talked a little bit about our characters and their lies, let's talk about you, my friend. You as a writer. What are some of the lies that you believe? And how can those hurt your writing career? And how can we see the truth? So I would love to lie to you and tell you that I am so organized that I put these lies in a specific, really cool order that's going to be optimal for your learning and listening pleasure. But honestly, I cannot tell a lie in this sense. I just wrote these down as they came to mind because these are things that I have seen time and time again as a writing coach, working with all different types of writers, from beginning writers to experienced writers who are encountering a block in their writing journey and who are finding themselves not really getting to the next level. And as a writing coach, this is what I really like to help with, is to help people to move through these blocks and to level up as a writer. So if you're interested in expediting that process, in my masterclass From Idea to Published in 6 months, I spend the whole first month actually on banishing some of these lies, excuses, false beliefs that really hurt a lot of writers. The fact that I've spoken with so many of you has taught me so much about the author's psychology. And you might think that in the course of this podcast, I'm going to be poking fun at these beliefs and at these lies, but believe me, I'm really not, because I have been there, my friend. I have believed most of these lies at some point in my writing career. And I'll bet you that there are some that aren't on this list because I don't even know that I'm still lying to myself on some level. So if there's anything that I forgot and you listen to this episode and you tell yourself, hey, I should really tell writing coach that she forgot this one crucial lie that really impacts me, please let me know. Please reach out to me. Go onto my website, creativeandwritingcoach.com, and you can find the spot where it says send me an email. Or you can even book a 15-minute call with me and you can tell me in person. That's really cool as well. Or also, if you are one of my Writing Coach On Demand authors, that's our unique membership program where you get bonus materials on each podcast. And you get writing exercises, writing prompts, and you also get 15 minutes of office hours with me, your writing coach. So this week, Writing Coach on Demand writers will be getting some exercises that really address these lies and some writing prompts based on that. And then in office hours, I really challenge you to tell me about the lie you believe. Let's see how this impacts you and let's move past it. Okay, let's jump on into this whole idea of these lies that writers believe that really hurt us. The number one lie is someone will steal my idea. This is something that I find really hurts writers in so many different ways because there is this idea that an original idea is key. And let me tell you, there's no truly original idea. And if you're thinking that it's just the premise that's going to make your whole book, you are not spending enough time thinking about developing an idea. You're not thinking enough about storytelling. You're not thinking enough about character and setting. And you really believe that this little seed of an idea is the most precious thing. When you believe that that's the most precious thing, and once you've had the idea, you might not be motivated to take that idea to the absolute end expression of it. You might get pretty sick of it pretty fast because I don't think if you think that someone can steal your idea that easily, I don't think that you've developed the idea enough. So of course it's not a unique enough because you don't have all the work that you need to do to take an idea into a full plot. And if you're interested in how that process works, there is a whole episode on that on the How to Be an Author podcast. You can just go back in the episodes and you will find it from idea to plot, a very useful episode for those of you thinking about how that process works. But many times also when you're so worried that someone's going to steal your idea, this now causes ripples in other directions. You start being afraid of sharing your idea with others. So this means that you have kind of an unrealistic view of how great and how unique your idea is because you're afraid of talking about it with others because you're so convinced they're going to steal it. And then you might not even want to get beta readers because you're like, oh my God, my beta readers are going to jump on my idea. They're going to try to steal my book. And let me tell you, this almost never happens. A book is so much more than its idea. It's all about the expression. And all writers are so in love with their own ideas, they're not going to steal yours. And even if they were to, do you think that their final product would look anything like yours? It would not. But those of us who are so obsessed with this idea of getting our ideas stolen, there's an even bigger ripple that happens is that you view yourself as me against the world. You feel like you are this little island and you're trying to defend yourself against these invisible enemies who are there to steal things from you. And this really gives you a big scarcity mindset when it comes to your writing career. You know what? If somebody stole my idea, I'd be like, great, I'll have another one tomorrow. Or great, I'll write it better. You know, ideas are a dime a dozen. So I really would challenge you to write as many ideas as you can all the time. Have a running tab of ideas. Have a notes doc open all the time where you can plop in all your ideas so that you tell yourself, you know what? These ideas, so what? They're more where that one came from. And of course, it's not a nice feeling. If you have proof that someone literally took your idea and ran with it, okay, that sucks. However, if that person stole your idea and they had time to actually do a whole book on it while you were still worrying about them stealing your idea, joke's on you, my friend. Joke is on you. Okay, here's another lie. This lie is, I'm a pantser, not a plotter. The minute I create an outline, I fall out of love with my story and I'm completely done. Oh boy. Listen, there is this divide that I think is artificial between people who are planners, i.e., they like to plan their book, they like to write an outline, they like to know every element, and they like to have a plot in place before they even start. And then you've got the so-called pantsers, who really kind of tell themselves this huge lie that is, oh, it's much more artistic and valuable to write a book without having a plan. It's this really huge lie you tell yourself that the muse is guiding you and that whatever you come up with on the fly is going to be better than something that you would have planned out. I don't think so, my friend. I think that what's going to happen is I love it when something kind of takes me by surprise when I'm writing. Absolutely. But I also like knowing that I have a good story structure for my novel. And it's a complete lie to tell yourself that you have to be one or the other. In fact, I think that the best writing happens when you kind of start off with your idea, you free write to get an idea of your voice, your tone, your setting, your characters, and then you go back and you make sure that your story has the key elements that it needs to really be a great story, a great yarn. If you want to write a book that sells well, and again, don't lie to yourself and say you don't, because what? You're going to do the work on your book and you don't want it to sell because you didn't want to sell out? We'll talk about that more in just a second. But if you want to write a book that sells well, you need to have the basic story structure, the classic one that people react to. You want to have a character who gets plunged into really bad trouble as soon as possible in the story. And everything they do to get out of that trouble only makes it worse until they find themselves in a completely helpless situation, horrible situation. And then they have to learn things to get out of that trouble so that they can kind of get those traits and get those strengths that are going to help them to succeed. That is your classic story structure. And if you don't have these pieces, if you keep giving your character a break and you keep getting lost writing about fun little scenes, your heroes having so much fun with their friends and they've got, all these great things because, you want them to be happy because they're your character and you love them. No, you think that that's fun, but if your hero's life is too easy, you are not creating a compelling story for others. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more in a second. But I think that you definitely need to not lie to yourself in terms of the muse is all important. My characters are in control. They do what they want. Honey, if your characters are in control of your book, you're crazy. The voices in your head are literally more important than what you're thinking yourself. That might be a problem. That might be a tiny little problem. And I think that, those of you who say that, the minute I write an outline, I fall out of love with my story. I'm just done with it and I have to move on to the next one. Well, then, honey, you didn't have a good enough story. So all of these lies to try to avoid doing something that resembles work and that resembles something that's a little scientific, these hurt your career. Because when I talk about a writing career, when I talk about a professional writer, when I talk about a published author, an authorpreneur, none of these things are loosey-goosey. These things are the result of actual work, sustained work over a period of years. Like, there's no overnight success. That's another great lie that writers tell themselves. Oh, I didn't succeed in a couple of weeks. Well, this is not meant to be, moving right along. No. You have to understand that this whole writing thing, it's hard work. And sometimes it's not romantic. And sometimes, you need to trim that story so that it actually moves along as if on the tracks of a roller coaster. You can't have it going off in every direction because fun as you think that might be for you, it's not fun for your writer. So this whole, I write a book that I would want to read. I only write for myself. No. If that's what you're doing, stop writing. Do something else for yourself. Go get a massage. It'll be cheaper. It'll be more immediately fun, right? That lie of saying I only write for myself, admit it. You're saying that because you cannot handle for anyone to give you any kind of feedback that you don't want to hear. And so, the book that you would want to read, it might be very different from the book that everybody else in the world wants to read. And I'm not saying that you're going to be writing only to market, but I am saying that when you're writing a book, it is an alchemy. It is a combination of your writing and your readers' reading that makes that book come to life. If you only write for yourself, you are losing a whole half of that equation, and you're not actually a real writer. You're just doing something else. I guess you're doing self-care. Let's call it self-care. Let's just call it journaling, and we'll stop there, right? So if you're only writing for yourself, get yourself a diary. And don't worry about any more of these podcasts because you don't want to be a writer. You want to be journaling or writing a diary. And you're going to find some other mode of self-expression, maybe, that suits you better than this writing thing, because this writing thing is obviously much too scary. And that's another lie, that some writers might think that it's not that scary to put yourself out there and that you're just, much more sensitive and you have a thin skin. You're just uniquely not good at receiving feedback. No. You think it's fun to receive bad feedback? It's not. It's horrible. We all hate it. It is horrific to be vulnerable. It is scary as anything. Every single writer gets bad feedback on their book. It doesn't mean their book sucks. It means that this one reader did not react well to it. It means that it wasn't for them. And believe me, some readers, when they've invested their time in a book, they feel pissed off that they've missed, doing something else with that time. They'll never get that time back. And they're angry. And I know that that sounds kind of crazy, but it happens. When you read those really mean reviews, the great news is your book didn't leave them without an opinion, right? It's better to give people some strong feeling. But saying that you have a uniquely thin skin and that you'll never figure out how to receive feedback, that's shooting yourself in the foot. That is a lie that is going to hurt you, because the feedback is a crucial piece of growing and learning as a writer. Because that's another lie, right? That you are born with X amount of talent, with knowing how to do this. Some writers are better than others. Some writers have what it takes already, and they don't need the feedback and they don't need the editing. And if I do need the editing, I'm not a real writer. That's a super lie. Come on. And no, you're not a misunderstood genius. Here's the thing, genius. If you want your reader to enjoy your book, you better not be misunderstood. If you're such a genius, find ways to be understood. Find ways to express your story in a way that your reader can actually grasp it. Because again, if not, just call it your diary and call it a day. And if you're telling me like, no, seriously, I really just write for myself, but I'm allowed to publish a book because this is fun and I don't want to make money. I don't want to sell out. Okay. But you really are putting yourself out there. You're probably not going to make money. Don't worry. But if you sell any copies, chances are you're going to get some feedback that you're not going to like. So what are you going to do? You're going to publish your book and then you're not going to look at any of the feedback or any of the reviews. And how are you going to make sure that no one finds it? Are you going to actively not promote it? That'll be really interesting. I really would love to see how that lie pans out for you. Because here's the thing. If you don't want to sell out, I don't know, that means that you don't want to sell your book. You don't want to make money from your book. That's almost as bad as those authors who start writing because they need money to make rent tomorrow. And I'm like, okay, how's that going to happen? You're putting a lot of pressure on yourself to make money from something that actually has a very long startup arc. Again, no such thing as overnight success. The people that you point out to me who are overnight successes, either they're not or they are the exception that proves the rule. And that's the reason we're all looking at them, that we're like, whoa, how did they do that? Because the rest of us know that that doesn't happen. So in terms of not wanting to sell out, listen, I get it that you want to write stuff that makes you happy. That is absolutely your prerogative. However, that might not be the stuff that you're writing for public consumption. That is the stuff for your journal. That is the stuff for your diary. That is the experimental stuff you put under a pen name, just in case somebody might find it. But selling kind of is important for most writers. And it's not a dirty thing to want to sell your books. I think that when you're talking about artistic production, it's production, right? You have to put something out there. You have to put it out there in a way that people are going to find it. And also, you want to know that it has value. If you don't sell any of your books, if you're making zero money from your books, well, your book technically doesn't have value right now. So that's really, really crucial to understand is that if you're telling me that you're not doing it for the money and you don't want to sell out, you're also telling me that actually it doesn't matter to you whether you write a good book or not. So make sure that you're crystal clear with yourself what your financial goals are with your book. And if you've got a specific financial goal, don't lie to yourself and tell yourself that it's going to happen without your intervention or without your work or without you putting yourself out there, without you writing for your reader, without you getting past the so-called gatekeepers. Right? So there's so many writers who shoot themselves in the foot so early. They're like, I'm not even really going to try because you know what? There's so many gatekeepers. Okay, what's a gatekeeper, right? What's a gatekeeper? So a gatekeeper is supposedly a big old meanie who is telling you no arbitrarily because they're mean. They're the equivalent of a nightclub bouncer who didn't let you in the club because you're not pretty enough. Really? Do you still believe that? The gatekeepers to this industry, because remember, this is an industry that makes money, the gatekeepers aren't so much gatekeepers as business people who are filtering out the writers that don't fit in their stable of writers, in their business model. So that bouncer who didn't let you into the club, this is probably, a little bit more difficult, but that bouncer who didn't let you in, they didn't let you in because you weren't dressed appropriately for the club. You don't represent the style that the club wants to have. You don't look like you made an effort. You showed up in flip-flops and greasy hair, and the bouncer is like, no, sorry, next. Well, you can't go around and say this is the bouncer's fault. This is your fault because you didn't make an effort so that you could become an asset to that club. Same goes with your book. If you're presenting something that is not polished, if you're one of these people lying to yourselves and saying, oh, if my book's good, an agent's going to keep reading because they're going to see the potential. It starts off slow, but it gets great and everyone's going to stick with it because I'm me. No. You're the same people who are going to then turn around and be like, I am a misunderstood genius. But here's the thing. You didn't create a product that a publisher thinks they can sell. And the reason they don't think they can sell it is because they don't think it'll appeal to your reader. And it won't appeal to your reader because there are things that you did not do with your story, with your style, with your characters to make readers want to read your book. So this is really important that I think that many times when we get rejected, when we query our books, for example, and we get so offended, we get so hurt by these rejections. But I say that these rejections are a great tool for improving our writing. It does not help you to lie to yourself and say, I got rejected because this agent is mean. Really? Agents don't have a lot of time. They don't even have time to be mean. Some of them might be crotchety, for sure. Some of them might be tired of seeing the same old tropes. Like, actually, you might get them mad because they're like, wow, you dialed this in with the theme. You dialed this in with the character. You dialed this in with a character who's completely flat. Yeah, they might get annoyed because you made them work for something that's not going to pay off for them. So that's really, really important for you to know. But here's the thing. Many of you then say, okay, I'm going to play it safe. I'm going to play it commercial. Commercial is something that people want. If you think that you can just say, oh, I'm going to take the easy way out and write a commercial success book, go ahead, I dare you. I wish that I knew all the secrets to this. And again, if you want to check out the podcast episode on writing a bestseller, I tell you about all the elements that can help you to write a book that will sell well. But you know what? There's a part of it that's this spark that none of us really know what exactly the magic is. However, there are some key non-negotiables to you writing a book that is going to sell well, but it's not easier than writing a book that's an artistic success at all. Stop it. You're so funny. It's like all the writers who tell me that I'm writing this book, but it would make a really great movie or TV show. Well, then write a script. If you're writing your book because you think it would make a great TV show, first of all, how's somebody going to find this book? Because if you're not planning on doing the work for people to discover your book and to discover this great story. And if you don't have, the tools to reach any of these wonderful Hollywood executives that should be so lucky to have your book, it's not going to happen. So for all of you who try to tell me, hey, you should ghostwrite my book for free because I know it's a great story, it's going to make a great TV show or movie, and we can split the profits, you're being delusional. You're lying to yourself, and you're trying to lie to me. You're trying to get me to do some free work for you when you know that you didn't put the work in. You haven't figured out how to make it into that great movie, because if you had, you would have done it by now. So don't try to think that, again, that idea has more value, or that it has a value in a certain realm that you're not familiar with. So that's a really important thing. If you're like, oh, it would be way easier for me to write romance, or it would be easier for me to write a commercial bestseller, great. Read more of those. Educate yourself on those genres and see why you think it would actually be, quote, easier to do that. Because when you tell yourself a whole group of writers has it easier than me because blah, it's challenging for me because blah, can you see how you're lying to yourself? Of course you're lying to yourself. And that's not helpful at all in the long run. Now, another lie that kills your productivity is the lie of how long this whole book writing thing is going to take. So half of you are like, I'll have my book done by the end of the month. And they're totally lying. And then the other half is like, it'll take what it takes, and I don't care. I'll just keep going. And both of you are lying to yourselves. So let's go over these two extreme lies about the whole process of writing a book and how long it takes. So those of you who lie to yourselves and say, my book will be done by blah. And I'm calling you out because you're lying, because you haven't based this in any kind of reality or any kind of, past experience. Now, putting a goal out there for yourself, giving yourself a deadline, yeah, that's crucial. That's awesome. I do this to myself all the time. And your deadline should be a challenge. I'll find myself in the last days of my deadline in a really bad mood. Everyone in my family knows to stay away from me because day in, day out, I am banging away at this book, freaking out because I've promised it to my beta readers by X date, or I've promised it to my editor by X date, or I've promised my readers that it'll be out by X date. And I'm getting kind of worried because I'm cutting it close. However, I know how long it takes me to write a book because I've done it before, and I know how I work, and I know how I procrastinate, and I know what motivates me. But those of you who, with zero proof that it's accurate, are going to say, I can write this book in a month or two, you're setting yourself up for a massive failure because of the lie you're telling yourself. If up until this moment you have not had this sort of productivity, how in the world are you going to get it done? And here's the thing, as we get closer and closer to the date, you're going to be less and less likely to do it, because believe me, when you've got guilt on top of fear, on top of disappointment, those are all bad feelings you start to associate with your book. And you're in fact making it less and less likely that you're actually going to get it done. And I have a friend who's done this to herself right now, and it's infuriating. I really, try to talk her out of it. And she's like, nope, I'm going to have my book done by the end of the month. And I'm like, how many words do you have? 3,000. Oh, okay. No, that is not going to work out for you. If you write less than 200 words a day and you have 3,000 words, you're not finishing a book in a month. You're not. And the other thing is the one who says, oh, it'll take what it takes. I can't rush myself. That's another huge lie. You can rush yourself, my friend, because if you don't rush yourself a little bit, you're going to lose steam. Momentum is one of the most precious tools we have as writers. And if you lose that momentum, you are robbing yourself of the best productivity tool that you have. Momentum makes it easier. So don't give yourself that free pass of saying you can't rush creativity. Well, you kind of can, because those who say you can't rush creativity, oh, it's because you're trying to write the perfect book. That's another lie. There's no book that's perfect. Make it better the next time. but give yourself a deadline. This is why when I did my course From Idea to Publish in 6 months, I came up with a audacious, ambitious, but realistic timeline so that you don't waste any time. And I am pretty open about the fact that, like, yeah, okay, it might take you twice the time to do what I set out for you because it's a lot of work. But be honest. Be honest and look at what it takes and don't do just part of it. Because also, those of you who say, I'll have my book done by X time, many times you will scramble to get it done, but you haven't taken into account the other pieces of the puzzle. You haven't taken into account the fact that you should have been working on your author platform. You should have been lining up beta readers. You should have been lining up editors. You should have a book cover. You should have a social media campaign. And now your book is done. So what? It's not really done because you haven't edited it. You haven't polished it. And you've really just kind of shot yourself in the foot because you lied to yourself thinking that you could have it done by X date, and you've cut corners. You've taken shortcuts along the way. So that's not really optimal. And I know that this part of it probably hurts a little bit because so many of us do this. So I want to just let that sit and talk about another lie that we tell ourselves that really, really hurts our writing career. It's that whole kind of personal vulnerability, not wanting to expose myself. People will think my character is me. My friends and family will not approve. I don't want to be canceled. All of that stuff. I need to write under a pen name. Therefore, I can't promote myself. That's a really, really big lie we tell ourselves. It's that ego talking. It's that fear of exposure. It's that fear of failure, because really it boils down to fear, right? What's your family going to say when they read this book of yours? Great news is that not that many people from your family will read it. And if they do, you know what? Half of them will just be proud that you wrote a book. And then half the others are egomaniacs too. And they're going to be like, oh my God, this character's me. And you can't stop someone from thinking that. I know that when I published a book recently-ish, some of my friends read this book and I was really pleased for the support. I usually don't even like it if my friends read my books, but I was pleased for the support. However, the number of friends who were like, oh, it was really cool when you did this. I'm like, dudes, the character's not me. It happens no matter what. Your character can look nothing like you. Your character can be nothing like you, and people will think the character's you. So no matter what you do, you just need to get used to this idea. But also, most readers are a little bit smarter than that. So give them credit, right? This whole issue of people thinking the character is you is when you're forcing people who are not your optimal reader to read your book. So of course your mom is going to look in the book and try to find, clues as to how she failed as a mother and how she, wrecked you emotionally and psychologically. Of course she'll do that. But people who are your reader are much busier looking to the character to see if they are relatable, if they're interesting, if they're nuanced. That's what readers want. So I work with many writers who are really challenged writing a nuanced character because they are afraid that people are going to look at them and judge them because the character's nuanced, because the character has an ugly trait, because the character tells themselves a lie, because the character secretly hates someone, all of these things. And they're like, I don't want to put that in there because, people are going to think badly of me. Most readers, not so much, right? So this challenge of how can I make my character nuanced? It's a big one. Because this is deep-seated. It really, really helps if you focus on what are the traits that make a good character instead of how cool do I want my character to be. I've often told writers to stop applying a beauty filter to their characters as well. And, too many times the character who's disfigured just has a tiny little scar on their cheekbone, very artistically arranged. You must have more nuance. Reality is ugly. You really don't want a character who is kept from being nuanced and interesting because you think is going to look bad on you, right? So forget giving them cute little interesting hobbies that are only slightly different from yours so that people don't think it's you. Forget giving them blue hair instead of your blonde hair. Really think, who are they fundamentally? What do they want? Why do they want it? What's keeping them from it and what will they do about it? All of that stuff is so much more important than making them cool and fabulous. Making your character miserable is a great way to set them up for awesome character growth. So keep that in mind. Finally, you've got this lie that is, I don't want to be canceled, so I'm not going to put myself out there and write anything that's a little bit risky. This whole don't want to be canceled thing, fair enough. Like, you don't want to be writing anything that's insensitive to certain groups that maybe you don't understand. You don't want to be gratuitously including people from a different culture just for your own gain, right? That would be cultural appropriation. But there is a huge difference between writing something that's a little edgy and writing something where you're demonstrating actual cultural appropriation. So all these writers who are like, I'm never even going to write it anymore because I'm afraid to be canceled. Well, you can only be canceled if you didn't do the steps that you needed to do to make sure that your book is not insensitive. So if you have a sensitivity reader, for example, and they okay your book, and then you make sure that you're writing everything with the best intentions, and then you write your book, and if somebody says, hey, I think this is inappropriate, as the author, you don't have to shut up and take it. You can actually stand up for yourself and say, hey, this is why I wrote this way. But interestingly enough, maybe I wrote it this way because I'm part of this structural construct where, this is the way I saw it. And this is actually part of an interesting conversation. We don't want to be offensive, but we also don't want to be so vanilla and so unoriginal that, because we're playing it safe. So don't lie to yourself that you need to play it safe. The writers who really succeed are the ones who go out on a limb a little bit. And they're not doing that just because they want the shock value, or they're not doing that because, they want to stand out. They're doing that because it feels authentic. So that's really, really important. And, you don't also need to do something that's so sensationalist, though. So think about, I know so many writers who end up having these characters that are over the top, settings that are over the top, plots that are over the top, because they lie to themselves and tell themselves, I'm a world builder and I'm a great storyteller and I, am smart. So I want to make sure that I don't insult my reader and I want to keep it really exciting. Well, that whole fear of boring the reader and of shoving your book full of stuff and, doing something that's just this huge scope of the book. Are you sure you're doing it for your reader, or are you doing it because you're afraid of actually finishing the book and putting it out there? Or are you doing it because you don't want to delve into the emotional part of the book that might feel uncomfortable to write? Realize why you're focusing on a certain aspect of your book versus another one. The funny thing is that some of the best books are the most simple. They have the most simple plot. They don't have a massive world setting. They take place in a single room, but they're emotionally fraught because that writer wasn't afraid to delve in and expose themselves a little bit as somebody who understands emotion. It's really important. And another thing of not putting yourself out there and not wanting to be vulnerable, and this is the big one that I saved for last because this is such a massive lie that totally hurts writers so much in their career, is I don't want to put myself out there or be too salesy. I'm a writer, not a self-promoter. I'm just going to write it. I'm going to see what happens. I'm just going to write the best book I can and it'll sell itself. No, it won't. And in terms of being too salesy, do you know how many people actually see all of your marketing efforts? None of them. The social media algorithm is such that nobody sees all of your posts. And even if they do, and if they're not interested, they're just going to skip past it. They're not going to say, oh my God, how dare this person put themselves out there and try to sell the product that they have. Do you look at McDonald's and think, how dare they advertise their fries? No, they're doing business. So any of you who lie to yourselves and tell yourselves that writing is just a pure art and not a business, well, you're definitely shooting yourself in the foot because you are going to be creating through your lie a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you are writing as a pure artist, writing only for yourself and not putting yourself out there to sell your book, congratulations, you're hitting your goal of not selling any books. So this whole fear of, marketing and that it's not for me and I can't do this, that's not true. As a writer, you're a storyteller. As a writer, you know how to communicate things, and that's what marketing is about. As the writer, who better to promote your own book, in fact? This should be part of your job. And I don't want to push it too hard because I know how many of you absolutely hate it. And there's a whole episode of this podcast that's dedicated to, selling your book and marketing your book and taking the ick out of marketing. I really think you should listen to that whole episode. But also, if this is something where you don't understand, if you're like, okay, I get it that I've been lying to myself about how important marketing is and how I really actually do need to promote my book, but now it's so entrenched in my personality that I just don't even know where to start. Fair enough. I've talked to a lot of writers where that's the case. My course From Idea to Published in 6 months literally has the marketing and author platform work that you need to do, step-by-step instructions in each month so that you are taking a full 6 months to build a really strong author platform where you're going to be finding and communicating with your ideal audience. Don't miss out on doing that just because you're lying to yourself. Don't miss out on learning how to do all of these things because you think or you lie to yourself about the fact that you should know how to do this automatically. Or don't miss out because you think that you need to be a well-known author by a certain age, or you need to be a certain type of author, or you need to, be like that author over there. All of those are horrible lies that really hurt you at the end of the day. So these are just a few of the lies that authors believe that hold them back. But I hope that you're starting to see that, there's not a whole lot of reality in that thing. It is something that you are constructing to try to protect yourself. But really, at the end of the day, you're hurting yourself because you're preventing yourself from reaching that dream that you have, that goal that you have. Now, a final category of writers is actually lying to themselves because they think they're meant to be a writer because maybe when they were 13 years old, their teacher told them they were a good writer and they should do this thing. And then their best friend was like, let's write a book together. And they're still feeling guilty because they, haven't done it yet. But that's because it doesn't resonate with them. Listen, you don't have to be a writer. That's not the only job out there. That's not the only means of artistic expression. And I was talking about when you're saying, this would make a great movie or TV show, maybe you want to storytell in different ways. That's okay. Don't hold on to a lie you told yourself early on because you think it's right, or you think it's honorable, or you think it would be cool. Try to be sincere about what it is that you really want to do. That's fair too. So I'm curious, reach out to me via email. Just find that website, creativeandwritingcoach.com, or check out the courses on onlineCoursesForWriters.com. But I would love to hear from you about which lies you've told yourself that you promise not to tell yourself in the future as a writer. I think is going to transform your writing career. It's going to complete that character arc for you as an author, and I'm excited for it. I can't wait to hear about how that goes for you. And I look forward to being with you next time on the How to Be an Author podcast. If you have any pressing writing-related questions or would like to be featured on the How to Be an Author podcast, please feel free to reach out on my website, creativeandwritingcoach.com.